Hey everybody, my name is Schey, and welcome to Habitat Now. It is my real honor to bring Philip Baldwin all the way from the UK to come and give us a talk that he honored us with during Glass Coast Weekend in January of this year. We're gearing up for Glass Coast Weekend 2025. It takes place January 9th through 12th down in Sarasota, Florida. We're looking forward to getting the information out about that hopefully this week and this upcoming week. And we're so excited to see you down there for an incredible extravaganza. So, without further ado, um, if you join these Zooms, we do them every Saturday at 1 o'clock. If you can't find the link or you want us to be on the membership, just sign up for our newsletter. But they're on our website under this little hamburger. There's a Zoom button. You can sign up every week and just have it ready to go. Our next exhibition plan is called Currents of Uncertainty by Dimitra Thanopoulos and Dean Benson. This happens on November 2nd. We're going to put her work on display in the main room. Is going to be incredible leaves all over the place with all kinds of different colors, all glass. And we're also going to have fun. We're going to put up a tree on the wall, and you can come in. We'll have leaves you'll be able to put your wishes on and put on the wall as well to be part of the event. It's going to be a great time. If you're around November 2nd, put it on your calendar. So Habitat's leaving for the next glass tour already. We're going to Seattle. It's going to be leaving, I think, maybe in a week or so, visiting artists around the area. It's going to be an exciting time. We're looking forward to the response and see how the trip was. It'll be a lot really fun to hear about. Um, Down in Glass Coast Weekend, what we were talking about earlier, we're doing a demo by artist Richard Royal. We're trying to open up the glass blowing studio down there, and it's going to be a lot of fun as the plan comes together. Also, next week on Friday, we have our glass auction. So if you haven't bid or if you want to know more about it, let me know. I'll direct it to the auction. There's over 80 works available to the highest bidder. Some great pieces in there. All right, we've got Glass Coast Weekend down. So without further ado, I'm welcoming Philip. Thank you for joining me today, and I see Monica's here too.
You. It's nice to be here from far away in Wales.
Far away in Wales. So I'm looking forward to the talk. So I'll have you take over the screen right now. And
Okay.
we had this talk, like I said, at the Glass Coast Weekend last year, and we heard from many people that it was one of the best talks they've ever experienced. So I'm really grateful for Philip to dive back in. I did record the original on my cell phone, but having Philip do the actual talk with context would be very, very helpful. There you go. I'm sorry, Philip. I had to enable something on my end. So I'm looking forward to this. It was a lot of history, but it was a different talk where it was more recent history. It's going to be an exciting time.
Okay.
Go ahead and take over the screen, Philip. We haven't seen it
So
yet.
to take over the screen,
Yep.
I do
Scroll to the
what?
top. Scroll to the top or bottom where you see that green arrow and click share.
Oh God, I'm so bad. Oh, partager. Wait,
Yep.
didn't we do this already?
We did a couple times, but it's
Good.
always fun to
You've done
dive in
it
again.
before.
Look for the share button. Yep. And it should be on the top of your screen or at the bottom.
Well, I've pushed share. Are you seeing now the three pieces?
Not yet. Nope. You could push share and there should be a select screen that we have to see beyond that.
Monica, you're going to have to come help.
She's already on her way
Something's
down. I apologize, guys. We worked through this stuff, but happens every now and then.
What went wrong?
What is it?
Bear with us a second.
Thank you. You get it. You get it in no time.
Where do we have to share it?
So
Partage.
click the share button and try to find the screen you want to
We
share.
haven't had to do that before. We didn't have to do that before.
Right here.
Computer giving you a new warning.
Um,
Push OK
okay. Where?
up there in the corner. So we're
Okay.
back here.
No. Partage.
Sorry about this.
Here.
We did
That's okay.
a pre-run. There you go. Partager.
Yeah.
There you go. Perfect. All right. Now click on the bottom button to make the full screen, please.
Did we do full screen?
Yep. Just go on the
Full screen.
bottom.
Down here. I can do that.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, technical stuff, but we're ready to go.
There we go.
Thank you,
Okay.
Philip. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Monica, very much. This is our third run through, and each time I don't know what can you do. I'm 77 years old, and I'm a Luddite, and even after whatever it is now, 25 years, we've had all this, and and still it freaks me out. Anyway, thank you for your patience. Thank you, Aaron, for inviting me to come back and reprise this talk from last February. I should say that only I was able to come to Sarasota in February. Monica had come 4 years earlier and did a wonderful talk. So this was my turn. And because we're reprising the talk, I'm going to try to replay what we already did. And I think I did re-listen. It was very impressive that Aaron was able to record the original talk on his iPhone. I was amazed at how well it worked. And I actually listened to it this morning and I wasn't embarrassed. So I hope you won't be disappointed. I think the first thing I want to make absolutely clear, as probably many of you know, Monica and I are a partnership. We've worked together for, oh my goodness, coming up on 45 years. In effect, we are two people, one artist. Our work is collaborative. Some of the ideas are Monica's, some of them are mine. Most of them are finalized in an interaction between us. And what we're doing in this talk and what sets it apart maybe from any previous talks we've done is that we decided we would simply skip over the first 35 years of our work, basically, and go primarily to the work that we've been doing over the last 6 or 7 years since we moved here to Wales. And that period of time has been marked by a series of major exhibitions, 2 cathedrals and 3 museums, 5 books, a very, very intense period in which our thinking evolved considerably. And so that's the focus of the talk, will be on this recent period. A lot of what has happened over these last 7 or 8 years was not planned. It landed in our laps quite suddenly, one thing after another. And I hope we can convey a bit of a sense of what that's been like and what we've been through. But to just sort of set the background for that, we'll run through for a few minutes, a little bit, the past history. We met in Sweden. Each of us had gone to Sweden to learn to blow glass. And we went to the Orrefors Glass School, a little factory school in Sweden, to learn glass blowing. And we had a very intense but very short training. We were there for 2.5 years. And then we moved to Switzerland. Monica is Swiss. I'm American. And we moved to Switzerland and set up our first studio. We were there for 20 years. And in the first 10 years, we were very much focused on tabletop design, very clean, sober design, which we made in production. We sold directly out of our studio, but also in stores. We weren't really ready for galleries at that point. But over those years, we developed a very clean line. And I'm really going to show you very few pictures about that. After the first 10 or 12 years, we got more and more into individual pieces. And we had in the early 90s, we had an extraordinarily fortuitous experience, which is that Lino Tagliapetra came and worked in our studio on 3 or 4 occasions. And we did a few collaborative workshops together and a kind of joint exploration. And it was an exhilarating experience for us. We had our background from Swedish design and craftsmanship. And Lino did for us what he's done for people pretty much all over the world, which is to share and encourage everything that's the best about glassmaking. And even though the time we were together was very short, it was fabulously productive for us. And while Lino was with us, he said, you know, you guys should look into glass cutting. And he referred us to Paolo Ferro, the cutter on Murano that he did cutting with himself. And I guess the light bulb went off, and we established a connection with Paolo. And as some of you may know, cutting on glass has become a hallmark of our work for the ensuing 30 years. This picture is just a very early piece from that period. This is a more recent piece. After 20 years in Switzerland, we moved to Paris. And one of the last pieces we did in Paris is this piece. And I'm showing it for a particular reason. First, because we adore it. And secondly, because about 15 minutes before a large group of American collectors, I believe sponsored by Habitat, was coming to visit our studio, and we were doing a little cleanup, and I dropped something from the mezzanine upstairs, and it dropped down and smashed this poor piece into smithereens. And that's the way it is. Usually we're pretty philosophical about such things, but it hurt to lose this piece. It was a special one. Anyway, I mention it because the accident of what happened will come back again at the end of the talk. So if you think of it, you can remember that when we get to the end of the talk. So in 2007, Nicolas Sarkozy won the French election. And a lot of French people were not happy about that. And there was a certain amount of vandalism in the country, and especially in the district where we lived in Paris, in the 12th arrondissement. A lot of shops were torched, shoe stores, barber shops, and our studio. And fortunately, it wasn't destroyed, but it was a very serious fire, and we had to retreat into the cellar and hire studios for about 9 months while we were while the studio was being rebuilt. And no sooner did the studio get cleaned up and back and running, and we lit the furnace and we're ready to go, and boom, the Great Recession hit. Well, that was a double whammy, and it was a bit of a gagger. I think we all remember it wasn't a great time, and sales came to a halt, things were canceled. Anyway, to make a long story short, we decided, let's not wring our hands. There's nothing we can do about this. Let's use the next months to do research and study what new ideas we might explore. And also at this time, we went to my parents for Christmas, and my mother is wonderfully thoughtful, and she always did stockings. And she put this little boat in my stocking, or Monica's, one of our stockings. And it's a little Maine peapod. You can see the net piled up in the front of it. And it's a very classic shape. It's an iconic boat shape. It's what's known as a double ender. So it pointed at both ends. And I don't know, a light bulb went off, and we decided, let's explore doing things with boats and filling boats with amphors, which is what boats transported a great deal in Greek and Roman culture and elsewhere. And so that began a long journey of our artwork. We still make boats, and it has been a dominant part of our work, one of the dominant parts these last many years. These boats very quickly became more extravagant, more exuberant, a lot of use of the incalmo technique, which is an Italian technique that we love. And in addition, we were so pleased with some of the things we put into the boats that we then began making them in larger standalone sizes and shapes that are sold as individual pieces. These are a few of the iconic things of the last several years. That piece, I think, Aaron, I think is in your gallery, if I'm not mistaken. This is a more recent one. It's called The Magic of Seven. It's intended as a single piece, and it was actually sold last year in the US. So that kind of brings us to the end of the Paris period, and we're almost on to the main part of this story. In 2014, we decided that we were getting on in years and we'd like to get out of the city and move to the country, and we were ready for a new adventure. So, to make a long story short, we went all the way to Wales and we found this fabulous old farm. And that building, which is an early 20th century, what's called a Dutch barn, and you're seeing it, it's already starting to be transformed in this picture. It actually even looked worse than that. And if it looks like a slightly depressing image, that's for dramatic effect because it was a depressing image. But we got lucky. To our absolutely a great amazement, the bank gave us a mortgage. We bought this property, I should have added. The bank gave us a mortgage. Now, anyone who knows, artists tend to have a fiscal situation, which if you draw it on a chart would look something like a relief map of the Rocky Mountains. It's feast or famine. And how we got that mortgage, I'm not quite sure to this day, but we did. And thanks to that, we were able to transform our studio, that building, into this. And that is our studio, pretty much as it looks today. This move from Paris was a difficult moment. I had a lot of ailments. One of them was rather serious. We were slightly bent out of shape, but never mind, we forged ahead. And the day that we actually loaded up the truck, we got our furnace right last thing to go into the truck, and the movers dropped the furnace on the sidewalk, and it broke in several pieces, irreparable. So our start here in Wales was a bit bleak. It was a bit, I was turning 70, Monica a little bit younger, but still. And we thought, gosh, what have we done? Anyway, you grin and bear it, and onwards we went. And our assistant, on top of that, our assistant, Theo Brooks, fantastic assistant, but he told us, he said, I'll see you through the move, but I'm a city person and I'm not moving to rural Wales. So we knew that was coming as well. And a week after Theo left, we got a call from a young man, Frenchman, Armel Desroux, who was finishing his training in Montreal at the glass school and glass program in Montreal. And he wanted to come work with us. I would say that he played a pivotal role in our regaining our enthusiasm. And no sooner did he get there, about a week later, we got another phone call, and it was from a gallery in Edinburgh. And this gallery was new to us, and they asked if we would do a show with them. And we went online and we looked and we thought, well, this is interesting, but the gallery is too small and it doesn't make sense. And we very politely told the gentleman, no, we can't do it. It's not the right fit for us. And he said, well, what if we get you a special space, something that suits you? And we said, well, we're open to anything, go ahead. And he called back 24 hours later and said, well, would St. Mary's Cathedral work? And we sort of said, what? Anyway, to cut long story short, we accepted this offer and we did this show in St. Mary's Cathedral in Edinburgh. The boat that you see there is a 9-meter boat, which we had done, 7 or 8 years earlier for a large exhibition at the Ariana Museum in Geneva. And it transported perfectly into this cathedral. It's placed facing the right-hand side, beautiful stained glass window in the cathedral, so that in the afternoon when the light is coming through, you get to see an incredible panoply of changing light across this boat. This exhibition was, let's say that the space was not an easy one to work with. We've always found that any space is challenging, but the spaces, the more unorthodox they are, they do make life more difficult, but they also make it more challenging and potentially creative. And that we felt was the case in this church more than anything we'd ever done. So this is the nave of the cathedral, and we hung this 12-meter mobile. Mobiles are another thing in our work that has been not a dominant part, but things we've been doing for several years. And we designed this one for the cathedral. This piece, this piece is also in Edinburgh, and it's a very special piece because it demonstrates something that's important to us, something that is, I think, inherent in any maker's process, and it's about repetition. Now, some people think, oh, repetition, you must do something new all the time and so forth. Well, you do want to do something new and creative. But in glass blowing, repetition is almost like a training on the one hand and a kind of meditation on the other. So the challenge, there are 72 amphor in this frame. It's about, I think it's 3 meters long by 1.20 meters wide. And there are 72 amphors, and they are, within 1 millimeter or 2, they're all the same. And the process of doing these things all the same, nevertheless, still allows you to put them together in a totally unique, original creation. And it also felt fitting that something about repetition and it has an almost Zen-like quality, a meditative quality, and of course is like many jests in making things, it's somewhat ritual. And we felt that this piece was very special, and we made it for this in exhibition, and we donated it to the church, and we're delighted that they wanted to keep it. And so if you ever get to Edinburgh, there it is, and it can be visited. There you see a detail of what I was talking about in the notion of repetition and consistency. And it's hard to explain. It's partially about craftsmanship. It's partially about discipline and just the joy of making something again and again nicely. So this piece was also in Edinburgh, and this piece is a totally unique shift for us, because it's more than just the aesthetics of the work. It actually is a statement. It's called Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. And it, as you can see, on the left is yesterday, in the middle is today, and on the right is a projection of a possible tomorrow. Obviously, it's related to environmental issues and some of the anxiety of our times. But it was for us a kind of shift or an opening up in our work that we had never done before. So now, after this exhibition, or I should say during this exhibition, we had one of the visitors to the exhibition was a lovely lady from Kent in southeast of England. And she loved this exhibition. And so much so that she went back to Canterbury, where she lives, and shared her experience with a very close friend of hers who happened to be the Dean of Canterbury Cathedral. And he was very intrigued. So to make a long story short, for the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War, we were invited to do an exhibition in Canterbury Cathedral. It was really an incredible honor. Canterbury, the cathedral it's not quite the Eiffel Tower, but it is for Britain a fundamental sacred monument. There's about 1 million visitors a year. The history of the cathedral is extraordinary. I think we made 32 visits from Wales to the cathedral to make this show happen. Without doubt, the hardest thing we've ever done in our careers, then or since. There are 6 prelates who run the cathedral, 300 administrators, and 600 volunteers. And I can assure you, every one of those people has an opinion. And some of them are important and influence what you may or may not be able to do. We nearly walked out of the project, I think, on several occasions, but somehow everybody was sufficiently committed and we stuck with it. And in the beginning, we were told, well, of course, you can't do anything in the nave. That's too difficult to space. And we accepted that. And we went about preparing other installations. And then somebody pointed out, we're about to put up a scaffolding because we're redoing the roof. And there will be a false roof to protect everybody from any falling debris from the roof. And as a result of that, once every 200-year situation, we were able to do something in the nave of the cathedral. And so we did what we called the Boat of Remembrance. And this is a very short 2-minute clip to show you that. One, two, three.
But if this bar were right here,
Put that steady together.
Help. How do I come out of here? Oh, there. Well, I think it gives a little bit of an idea of what creating this piece involved. I should point out that the shape and proportion, as with all our boats, goes straight back to that little peapod that you saw at the beginning of the discussion about boats. This piece, it represented not only the sort of memorial to the end of the war, but also the 100 years since the end of the war, each amphor representing 1 year. So this is another boat that we did in the cathedral. It's called the Pilgrim's Boat. And it's a pretty big boat. It's 3 meters long, and it's about 1.5 meters tall at the tallest spindles. And you're seeing it placed directly over the original grave of Thomas Becket. Thomas Becket was the famous archbishop who was assassinated in the cathedral in the 12th century. And pilgrims came from all over Europe, and still do, to venerate his tomb. And of the hundreds of extraordinary things in the museum, the one that I've personally found the most extraordinary was the steps leading up to this location. Pilgrims came on their knees and climbed the steps on their knees, and then moved around in a kind of rectangular form to pray in front of Becket's tomb. And to this day, you see in the steps the dips from the knees of the pilgrims, and in the sort of space around where the tomb was, a kind of trough worn by the knees of hundreds of thousands of pilgrims. It's very powerful to see it and realize what that represents. That's the same boat which subsequently found a home at the Ebeltoft Glass Museum. It's got its own room, and it's also a seaport, so it's a very nice place for that boat to have ended up. So we get to the end of Canterbury on the heels of Edinburgh, and next thing we know, we have an invitation to do an exhibition at Ebeltoft. And Ebeltoft is in Denmark. We'd actually done a show there about 20 years ago, but the director, Dagmar Brenstrup, she came and visited the Canterbury exhibition and asked us to come to Denmark. Oh, I meant to mention this. This is still in Canterbury. Once again, we felt it important to make a reflection on what this 100 years since the end of the First World War has meant. I am inclined to think that in several hundred years, we'll look back on this period and refer to it as the Second 100 Years' War. You might wonder what's in that boat. It's actual real munitions. And we had the concept for this boat, and we wondered, well, where on earth are we going to get, rejected used munitions and so forth? 2 miles down the road from our house, there's a little shop in a village with a guy who sells electric guitars. Turns out he's a collector of old war detritus and munitions. Go figure. But anyway, we were able to buy them from him. And the boat is actually just 2 glass panels that have been thermally formed to give the shape of the boat. It again
Come on,
is.
Philip.
Yes. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. once again, it's a bit of a jarring note, but here again, we felt, well, it's not just all beautiful. The dark side needs to be looked at. So I just mentioned that we had this invitation from Denmark, and we thought, well, okay, this is very different. What are we going to do here? And it coincided with the arrival of the New Yorker. My family has been subscribing to the New Yorker, I think, since the first issue in 1925. So I grew up with it, and I still enjoy it, and Monica does too. And the issue arrived, and this was one of the cartoons. Needless to say, it's not really about dinosaurs. It's about us. And we thought about this cartoon, and we said, we've got it. We have a theme for our show in Denmark. And the first thing we came up with was a wall of comets, which is entitled Destination Unknown. It's about 5.5 meters tall and 4 and a bit meters wide, and it's got lots of blown glass comets together with various rocks from our backyard, which represent meteors. You're about to see more of this, but I wanted to point out that the architectural space of the museum in Ebeltoft is a very difficult architectural space. I'm not talking out of school. Everybody involved at Ebeltoft thinks so too. It's really a difficult space. And instead of arguing with that space, we thought, well, let's embrace the space and build the show into the space in a way that works. So mindful of the cartoon and the comets, we decided to create, there you have a more close-up image of the comet wall. And one last reflection before going on. This is part of a whole series of objects that we created as a kind of timeline, a historical timeline. And this is the first thing in the timeline. You could say it's a picture of disaster, but we prefer to think of it otherwise. If you think that a comet or meteor blasted out the dinosaurs, it's true. It did. Maybe that's tragic. On the other hand, we see the red sphere as the positive result of what happens subsequently. So if there are however many hundreds of thousands of species of birds today, it's considered that they may well be the what followed after the dinosaurs. So catastrophe, yes, but also good things can follow. So anyway, we took the space of the museum, this one large hall, and decided to do a kind of construction of the zodiac, of our place in space. Essentially, there are 12 steel rods. Each one represents one of the signs of the zodiac: Aries, Pisces, Sagittarius, et cetera, together with the planets, the sun and the moon. And at the other end, from the comet wall, you have a depiction on the blue wall of the 5 visible planets, the sun and the moon. The sun being the round yellow steel piece, and the moon being centered in that. As I'm sure you're aware, we have 7 days in the week. They're named for the 5 visible planets, plus the sun and the moon. A timekeeping concept that is at least 8, 9, 10,000 years old. supposedly we didn't see these planets until more recently than that, but somebody must have. Unfortunately, this shot is in still, it's not, it's actually a pendulum meant to indicate time, but you can't see it moving. It has a little electric motor above, which makes it go tick-tock. So you have the sense of time in motion in this room. Now, bear with me a minute, because this is a thing that I would like to explain. If what I say doesn't make any sense, and if you're interested, the book about the show that the museum in Ebeltoft did can be found on our website, and it has an appendix devoted to the precession of the equinox. Precession, when I've given this talk in Sarasota, and I also gave it once in Switzerland in French. And each time I asked the audience, has anybody ever heard of the precession of the equinoxes? Not one hand went up. Most of us don't know about precession. Precession is the sort of the ground zero of our place in the universe, or in our local universe, in our solar system, within our galaxy. And in effect, it's a 26,000-year cycle through which the Earth passes through all 12 signs of the zodiac. Now, what does that mean? So you need to imagine you've got the Earth spinning counterclockwise and also going around the sun counterclockwise, 365 days in the year, doing a full spin every day. Meanwhile, because of the pull on the Earth by the sun and the moon, the Earth is actually a little fatter in the middle. It's not a perfect circle. It's got pressure on it in the middle, which is pulling at it, which is what, of course, gives us tides. But because of this, the Earth is doing this spinning on its axis with a slight wobble caused by this pulling. And that wobble, the sort of the kind of cone-shaped thing with the circle at the top that you see, that wobble takes 26,000 years to do one full circuit. And in that 26,000 years, it passes through the 12 signs of the zodiac, about 2,100 years per zodiacal sign. Incidentally, when we did this show, I happened to be 72 years old, and 1 degree of a 360-degree turn in this whole cycle is 72 years. So I was amused when we did this to think that I represented 1 degree. Now, not only is, from where Monica and I sit, this is fascinating in and of itself. But what's also fascinating is we know from archaeology and we know from mythology, people have known about precession of the equinox for at least 10,000 years. Mr. Ptolemy did not give us the notion of precession. It's been known about for a very, very long time. How the heck did Neolithic or Paleolithic people know about the precession of the equinox? I don't have a clue, but isn't it fascinating? So when we were explaining the process of this exhibition to the director, when we finally started to get this plan worked out, the curator, the director, they said, now, Philip and Monica, you will not forget that we're a glass museum. And we said, don't worry, there'll be plenty of glass in the show, which there is. But we thought it would be good to make kind of a statement around glass. And even though this is opaque, because we actually like opaque, these figures are kind of monolithic watchers, if you will. And they're big. They're about some of them I think are about a meter and a half. What's that? 4.5 feet, something like that. And this assemblage is sort of on the wall facing the room with the signs of the zodiac and so forth. But it's nice to notice the pedestals. Now, in our view, pedestals are something that should be as minimal as possible. You don't want to see the pedestal, it's about the piece of work. But somehow we were captivated by the fact that next to this museum, just literally a few hundred yards down the street, was another museum dedicated to wooden ships. And they have one of the last great wooden warships of the Danish Navy, which is a museum, and they have a whole workshop where they service the ship, repair it, do general boat repairs. And they had these magnificent oak logs. And we were able to buy these logs as pedestals for these pieces. And it's a rare case where it seems to us at least that the pedestal is somehow crucial to the piece. It just works very nicely. This is another installation in the show. Gosh, I want to say the name of this piece, and I'm blanking, but it's obvious, I think, what's going on here.
Unintended consequences.
Thank you, Monica. Unintended consequences. The photograph of the individual you see in the background was a very special and dear friend of mine that I met in the early 70s climbing in Africa. And we became great pals. He's older than I am, and he has sadly just died a few years ago. But we did a lot of climbing together, and we did an expedition up Mount McKinley together in the late 70s. And his whole family became dear friends, and also with Monica when subsequently she met Walter. And Walter was a very, very brilliant chemical engineer. And in the 1950s, the PET bottle was originally made, but the PET bottle, as was in the 1950s, plastic bottle, wasn't very serviceable because it couldn't deal with pressure and carbonization. Anyway, to make a long story short, Walter, who was the chief chemical engineer at a research facility for Unilever in Germany, cracked the solution and came up with the solution to make the PET bottle universally useful and being able to take carbonation. It was a major breakthrough. That was in 1972, I believe. And of course, on the right-hand side of the page, you see the results. As I'm sure is obvious, we prefer the bottles on the left. But once again, this is the thing that keeps coming back and hitting us in the face of these problems of unintended consequences. Just a brief pause to remind you the context in which we work in which these crazy ideas get thought up. Actually, that's a picture of our house not that long ago, and it must have been in October because the ivy on the house on the left is just about the way it looks today on the 5th of October. You don't usually get that much bright color in Europe like you do in New England, but on ivy, it happens. In the middle is a barn that's dates from about 1450, and on the right is our studio. There are actually 6 buildings on the property, and they cover 6 centuries of architecture. There's another old barn. There's a granary from the 17th century. It's an interesting property, and it's called Hare's Green Farm. And at least as far as we can tell, it's been a farm at least since the 16th century. If you're in the studio and standing at the glory hole and it's a warm day and you can open the door, that's what you see out the door. So we're pretty lucky, and we try to remember every day just how lucky we are. Monica and I have been together for 45 years, and Monica has always said she loves donkeys and would love to have a donkey. So about 6, 7 years ago, our assistants and I went on a donkey hunt, and we found a place, a farm about 2 hours from here that had donkeys. And we said, we'd like a donkey. And they said, no way, you have to have 2 donkeys. Donkeys don't like to be alone. And we won't sell you a donkey unless you take 2 donkeys. Okay, we'll take 2 donkeys. So Monica knew nothing about this, and we organized the people to come, and we had a ruse so that we knew Monica was working in the studio. And we put a collar around one donkey with the word happy hanging from it. And we put another collar around the other donkey with the word birthday on it. And we dragged the 2 donkeys over to Monica's window where she was working, tapped on the window, and she looked up, and there were these 2 creatures. And it was love at first sight. And they remind us every morning of what it must be like to wake up in Jurassic Park, because these animals do make extraordinary noises. That's the inside of the hot shop. You're standing where our office is, and our design space where we draw. And I say we draw, mainly Monica draws. And you can see the furnace at the end, and bench, and the windows on the left, that's on the other side of the building, which is where the cold shop is. We do all the cutting. That's the team that those assistants are no longer with us, but that was the team at the time of doing the next exhibition that you're about to see in France, Conche. Just a quick question, Aaron, how am I doing for time?
Doing fine.
Okay. It's worth remembering that none of these things, everything you've seen, it would be impossible without help. And not just the assistants, but our bookkeeper, Joe, Emma, who's helped us with a lot of research and a lot of, working on the books that were done with the museums and so forth. And everything about glass, I think that it just about everything, maybe not 100%, but you always see that it's a collaboration. And that's one of the wonderful things that I think Lino so beautifully has shown. These great teams of everybody working together. It's a particularly joyous part of doing glass. So we got through Ebeltoft, and we thought, well, let's have a little break. And we took the car and we drove to the south of France. And we were interested. We went to Narbonne. Narbonne is a coastal town and just above Perpignan on the Spanish border. And we were interested, especially because a brand new museum opened there about, I guess now it must be 4 years ago. Norman Foster did a wonderful museum dedicated to Greek and Roman artifacts in the port of Narbonne. And Narbonne was a major trading center in the classical age. And guess what? It was about boats and amphor. And we literally, I kid you not, seems to be the hallmark of all these shows we're telling you about. About a week after we were in this museum, we had a call from another museum in Conche, in the west of, about an hour and a half west of Paris, the Musée des Verts de Conche, which is a lovely little museum. And they had just had a huge renovation, and they were going to be opening within a year, and they asked us if we would be their first contemporary exhibition. And so, of course, we said yes to this, and we knew right away that we would do something with amphor. And so the first thing we came up with was this wall called Amphor Metaphor. It's 257 blown objects, and it's all black opaque glass. It's about 4.5 meters wide and 2 and a bit meters tall. And once again, it's one of those iconic pieces of which we're very proud and fond. And it has an interesting corollary to it. We have a neighbor who is a very renowned anthropologist. He was head of anthropology at Cambridge University. And he often comes by and visits, and he saw us making this, and he said, "Oh, this is so wonderful," and so forth. And about a week later, he calls up and he said, "You won't believe this, but I have read The Guardian this morning, and there's an amazing article in there." And he forwarded this photograph. And that was a archaeological find somewhere in Greece that had uncovered all of these amphor at the bottom of the sea. And of course, you can see that there's nothing left of the boat they were in. It probably looks something like this. And I can promise you that our conception of the amphor metaphor was not influenced by this, because we didn't know about it. It is funny how those things work. This amphor is from a civilization dating back to about 3000 BC. It's a culture called the Harappans from the Indus River Valley, sort of in the area around between Pakistan and India today. And this object was only found in 1920. The whole Harappan culture was only discovered in 1920. And here, besides the fact that this is to us an extraordinarily beautiful piece, it turns out that over the ensuing 100 years that they've been excavating at this site, the archaeologists have found it's a very unusual place. There is no sign of hierarchy in the Harappan cities. It's laid out very much like Manhattan on a grid. The buildings are very egalitarian. There are no temples. There's no sense of an overriding hierarchy, as of course we know from Egypt and Mesopotamia and Sumer, all of which go back to the same period in history. Well, we thought that was pretty cool. And so we made these pieces kind of in honor of that culture. These pieces are in rather shocking contravention of the ones you've just seen, and they're called the Aristotelians because they're based on our own acclaimed Greek and Roman culture and the birth of science and rationality, and they're very geometric forms. We think they're very beautiful. They represent an amphoric shape that is iconic to that period. It's interesting that if you take the period in Greece from 500, sort of 550, 400 BC, you're in what's known today as the Axial Age. So it's the period from Anaximander to Pythagoras to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, parallel with the Buddha, parallel with Confucius. Merely a coincidence? Who knows? In any case, our own cultural heritage here in the West is in great measure based on this. And so these pieces are a way of representing some of the implications of the thinking of that time. This is something else entirely different. This amphora is representing the Amazon rainforest, which is got less and less green and yellow and more dark. Some of these works, admittedly, are, we hope, beautiful, but they also tell a story. This one is called The Night Sky, and it's an image of what's happened to our night sky in the 20th and 21st century, which, as we all know, is ever more lit up at night. I read a statistic not long ago that's something like 90% of the people in Europe can't see a night sky, which is pretty stunning if you think about it. So we're in the middle of preparing this show. It's February 2022, and we're all excited and doing these amphoras, and boom, we have the war in the Ukraine that hits us over the head. And I think it was such a jolt that we thought, gee, we can't just sail into this exhibition without somehow embracing this catastrophe. And so we decided to try to, in some way, address the subject, if you will, honor the plight in which we find ourselves. And the name of this piece is quite logically Ukraine. And unless it's not absolutely clear, that's a hole in the middle of the piece. And we decided to join Ukraine to some of the other factors that are relevant. So we put in Russia. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think you can see it. It's on. You're seeing two sides of the same piece. On one side, it says Lenin, Stalin, and Putin, and on the other side, it says Tolstoy, Chekhov, and Dostoevsky. It's not black and white. A lot of beautiful stuff has come out of Russia. It's complicated. This piece is a disturbing piece. It's a sort of a schizophrenic piece because we think it's very beautiful, but it's also very sinister. I think you can see that the bullets are headed in and they're headed out. And of course, it's meant to signify a bit of the crisis of our age. And the fourth piece in this series is preceded by its model. This is probably the most beautiful amphora we've ever come across. And it also is about 5,000 years old, if not older. It dates to the Bampo culture in China between the 5th and the 4th century BC. And not only is it beautiful in shape, but if you look closely, you can see that it has little inciso cuts on it, which appealed to us, of course, enormously. You know, it's funny, in the research we did about amphora, we just assumed amphora related to the Mediterranean world. But of course, amphoras are and were everywhere. South America, they've even been found in ice dating back 18,000 years. It's a very, very old and universal container. So we use this shape to illustrate the fourth country that we felt was relevant, which is China. So you have obviously the shape on the left is representative China in antiquity, and the other side of the piece represents China in its current form. Once again, we think we have no shame about having borrowed that shape because it's so extraordinarily beautiful and iconic. Now we change again. This is actually a snap of a piece that had been designed for Canterbury Cathedral. It's called the People's Wall, and I think is self-explanatory. There you see it in the cathedral. But it also went into our next exhibition, which was in Romont at the Musée du Verre in Romont, where we finished in 2023 and which just ended this winter. And this is just a shot of a library of current work that we did in that exhibition. There were two rooms in this exhibition. One room we devoted to current work that we're doing, and the other room, which I'm about to show you, was some of the ideas that we explored. This is a quote from Einstein, which I'll read. "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." We weren't able to prove that Albert Einstein said that. It's attributed to him. But from what little we know, it would be entirely in keeping for him to have made a reflection like that. So with that in mind, as I said earlier, we loved the amphor metaphor piece so much, we also installed it in this. This museum in Roma is a beautiful medieval fortress.
In Switzerland.
What did I say? God.
I think you have to say not everybody will know that it is in Switzerland.
Sorry, I apologize. Good. Yeah, Romont is a medieval town in the French part of Switzerland, and it's on a hilltop in this really a medieval fortress, which is today this art museum. This is in reflection of Einstein's remark. On the right, you have the right brain, which is meant to imply intuition, creativity, discernment. And on the left, you have the rational brain, which is science, facts, 2 + 2 is 4, etc. And our brain, of course, is composed of these two halves. I think Monica and I feel that one of the challenges of our time is that we're too weighted in the left side, in the rational side, and haven't left enough space for the intuitive side, the discernment side. It's a balance between these two things that I don't think we have in too good balance today. So we want to leave you on an amusing note. In case you think our assistants have a boring life, they don't. This is our assistant Philomene, whom you saw earlier in the picture, and she's placing the pieces in an aquarium that we built for not for Romont, but for the earlier show in Conches. This piece is called Baldwin Guggisberg 4000 Common Era. It's a projection of our work in 2000 years of what there might be left of it. We think it's a rather cheerful projection. If the water looks clean, the fish are happy, and there are all these artifacts for the archaeologists in 2000 years' time to speculate about what on earth was going on here. And I think with that, we are at the end of this little chat. And I hope you enjoyed it. I have to say that I'm discovering that it's harder to do this looking at the screen than standing before people in public where you have a better sense of interaction. But if we can answer any questions or whatever, we're delighted to do so. And thank you for listening.
Thank you,
And
Philip.
you, Aaron, for having us.
You're most welcome. Thank you, Philip. Go ahead and stop sharing your screen. That was an incredible presentation. You did just as well as you did in Florida, so worry not about that. I got a quick question about the amphor actual vessel form. It has no base, so it's always tilted on its side. Are they often like were they often like capped, or were they often had tops, or how did they keep whatever was in there from falling out?
Okay, so they were, if you go and look at the boat you have in your gallery, you will see in the bottom is a bed of sand. And amphor were pointed, they could sit down in the bed of sand, which gave them stability. Now, I'm embarrassed to say that now that you're asking this question, I don't really know why they came up with that concept.
To hold off. I mean, if a boat goes over the sea and there's sea going on, Philip,
Yeah.
the sea going on, the waves, and boat is not stable. You have it in sand, and it will absorb the shock, and the amphor is not going to move around. It's just a shock absorber, and it keeps it in balance.
That was a vastly more intelligent answer than the one I gave. Thank you, Monica.
Great. So that not only do they have to bring these amphors on the boat, they had to bring piles and piles of sand just to make sure that they can not tip over or lose everything or get knocked over. That's hilarious.
When you see those things lined up on the shore, they seem to just line up next to each other and they're on their point. But you're right. It obviously is about the transport more
Right.
than anything.
That's for sure. Well, that's great. If nobody has any questions, feel free to interrupt me as I close out. But thank you, Philip and Monica, for being here today. It's fun seeing you guys interact too. I know you guys have worked together for a very long time, and it's always interesting to see the relationship and as it works out live and in person. There are available works at the gallery, so feel free to give me a call, come by and see them. They're incredible, and we're looking forward to future plans with Philip and Monica as more exhibitions come to reality and more things come to the present. So thank you again for joining me today, everybody. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I look forward to seeing you if you have any questions. Take care. Have a great one.
Thanks so much. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you to everybody, especially Aaron.